in the stillness before the day begins, before merchants raise their voices in markets, before soldiers tighten their sandals for the march, before senators gather in marble halls to weigh the matters of empire. Imagine Rome resting, the great city breathing in silence as the first pale light of dawn brushes against her 7 hills. The air is cool, touched by the faint fragrance of cypress trees and damp stone, and the Tiber glides quietly, reflecting stars that are slowly surrendering their brightness to the horizon. You stand there in the hush, not as a traveler rushing, not as a citizen hurrying to duty, but as one who lingers, who watches, who listens to the heartbeat of a city that would one day be called eternal, and yet is still only waking, her story not yet fully told. The rooftops are silhouettes against the morning, flat lines and terracotta curves rising one after another, and the great domes and arches that will later carry shouts of triumph now hold only the soft echoes of wind. A dog barks distantly, its sound carried like a thread through narrow alleys, but otherwise the streets are hushed, stones damp from the night, shadows stretching like old memories along the walls. You can almost hear the centuries in this quiet, for though the city is waking to one particular day, you know it has always been more than a single day. Always a gathering of ages, layers upon layers of time pressed into the same earth, as if the stones themselves have kept watch, patient witnesses to ambition and decline. As the light grows, you begin to see the outlines of columns, tall and patient, their flutes etched with the fingers of artisans long gone. The forum, where voices will soon rise in debate and bargaining, lies empty, the silence so deep that your own breath seems louder than the sound of the wind. You can walk there slowly, tracing with your eyes the arches of triumph that promise victory. The statues of men cast in marble, their features carved to defy the erasure of years. And yet, in this dawn, there is no clamor, no clashing of swords, no clattering of coins, only stillness. And in that stillness, the sense that power, however loud it becomes by day, is always rooted in silence by night. The city that will one day stretch its influence across the known world is here revealed not in conquest but in rest. Its empire is still a dream carried upon the shoulders of men who do not yet know how far their roads will reach, how high their aqueducts will rise, how vast their legions will march. It is easy to imagine the sound of footsteps that have not yet begun, to feel the gathering of voices not yet raised, to know that the weight of centuries is preparing itself in this hush. You breathe deeply, the air cool, the promise of dawn soft, and you realize that even empires begin with mornings like this. Quiet mornings, mornings where nothing seems urgent and yet everything is waiting, mornings that stretch into history. The rise of Rome is not only the story of battles and senators, emperors and monuments. It is the story of mornings where stones warmed slowly beneath sunlight, where rivers kept their silent flow, where voices prepared to speak but had not yet broken the quiet. And if you listen carefully, as Daniel once listened to his visions, as prophets once leaned into the silence of heaven, you may hear in this stillness the murmur of destiny, the soft music of inevitability, the truth that what rises will also fall, that what begins in silence will end in silence, that empires are but breaths between dawns. So let yourself rest within this vision as you rest upon your bed. Let Rome at dawn become a lullaby, her streets empty, her columns still, her arches waiting, her stones cool beneath your hands. Let the quiet of her beginnings ease your own thoughts, soften the noise of your day, and invite your body into calm. For though the story of Rome will unfold with noise and glory, with triumph and tragedy, it begins here, in silence, in rest, in the same rhythm that now carries you. And if this vision has begun to soothe you, if the quiet of dawn over the eternal city has settled into your breath, you may, in your own gentle time, choose to like this video, or leave a comment sharing which part of Rome's dawn rests most deeply in your mind, or share this with someone who also seeks peace, or subscribe so that each new journey may return to you in the quiet of night. There is no urgency, no demand, only the soft invitation carried in the same silence that has always held the beginnings of empires. Block 2. The first stones of power. In the soft unfolding of time, long before marble temples gleamed beneath the midday sun, long before senators draped in white argued in echoing halls, long before the roar of the Colosseum or the steady march of legions across distant lands, Rome was only a whisper, a fragile story told around fires, a myth carried in voices that lingered more like song than history. To speak of the beginnings of Rome is to step into a twilight where legend and truth walk side by side, where shepherds and kings, brothers and rivers, gods and mortals all leave their footprints upon the same soil. And so, as you rest deeper into the calm of this narrative, let the story of foundations unfold around you as gently as mist rising from a quiet field. Each detail soft, each image steady, carrying you farther into the dreamlike rhythm of beginnings. It is said that the cradle of Rome was rocked by wolves. The twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, were set adrift upon the waters of the Tiber. Their cries carried not to men, but to a she-wolf, who lowered her body to shelter them, who bent her head to nourish them. Whether myth or memory, the image itself feels timeless, the eternal city born from fragility, nurtured not by palaces, but by wildness, by nature itself bending to mercy. Imagine the banks of the Tiber, green reeds swaying in the hush of early light, the water lapping softly against the shore, and two infants resting in a basket of woven reeds, watched over by a creature whose instincts were transformed into guardianship. In that silence of beginning, Rome was nothing more than a promise, a possibility, yet already wrapped in a story that would echo through centuries. As the twins grew, their lives were bound with shepherds and hills, with the modest tasks of tending flocks and walking rough paths. Rome's first stones were not marble laid by architects, but footprints pressed into earth by exiles and wanderers, by men who carried their hopes more than their possessions. The 7 hills that would later cradle domes and palaces were then only quiet slopes covered in grass, where the breeze moved through trees and the cries of birds filled the morning air. It is here, in this quiet, that Rome's foundations took shape, not foundations of stone alone, but of will, of rivalry, of destiny pressing itself forward through the choices of brothers. The story tells that Romulus, in anger or in fate, struck down his twin, Remus, leaving himself to raise the first walls, to carve the first boundaries of a city that would one day know no boundaries. A tragic origin, a life born from loss, an empire rooted in both promise and blood. And as you imagine this, let your thoughts not race into violence, but drift into the hush that follows it. The silence that lingers when words are too heavy, the way earth itself seems to pause when blood touches its surface. Out of this silence rose Rome, its first stones laid with both grief and determination, as if to remind all who would come after that greatness is never born without cost, and power is never built without weight. Picture now the slow rising of huts upon the Palatine Hill, roofs thatched with straw, walls of mud and wood, smoke rising gently into the evening sky. The hum of daily life begins to settle, shepherds guiding flocks, women grinding grain, children running barefoot across soft earth. These sounds, faint and ordinary, are the true beginnings of empire. For every marble column that would one day dazzle the eye was first imagined in the shadow of a wooden post. Every paved road that would stretch across continents was first walked as a narrow path between huts. Every legion that would shake the ground was first a gathering of men learning to stand together. In this humble silence, Rome began to breathe. The first stones of power are always invisible to those who lay them. They are carried in the shoulders of those who build, in the hands that set walls upright, in the voices that tell stories by firelight, in the small rituals of daily survival. To imagine Rome's rise is not only to see emperors crowned or armies triumphant, but to remember the quiet moments, the sound of hammers shaping wood, the flicker of torches lighting rough streets, the prayers whispered to household gods, the steps of brothers walking paths where no city yet stood. These are the sounds that carry you deeper into the rhythm of rest, the lullaby of beginnings, the hush of foundations unseen. As you lie still, think of the first stones beneath your own life, the quiet beginnings you have forgotten, the days so small they seemed meaningless but were, in truth, the true beginnings of what you are now. Rome reminds us that greatness grows slowly, silently, beneath notice, and only later reveals itself in arches and thrones. For now, in this moment of narration, let yourself rest in that slowness. Let yourself trust in beginnings. Let yourself breathe with the rhythm of foundations being laid. The eternal city did not rise in a day, nor in the span of one man's life, nor even in the harmony of brothers. It rose in silence, in struggle, in stories, in myths that softened into memory. And so too may you rise, quietly, slowly, letting sleep build its own foundations within you now. Block 3. The Republic Awakens. When the first huts upon the Palatine Hill had hardened into villages, and when the voices of shepherds and traders began to mingle in the hum of barter and daily life, Rome passed slowly from myth into structure, from the whispers of origins into the steady breath of institutions. It was no longer only the tale of brothers and rivers, of wolves and reeds, but the shaping of a people into a form of governance, the invention of a republic that would carry its rhythm far beyond the 7 hills. Imagine now this transformation not as a sudden leap, but as a long unfolding, a city waking gradually, like dawn spreading over rooftops, until the light touches every stone and every street. The kings who once ruled gave way to a new voice, not the command of a single crown, but the gathering of many. The Senatine assembly of elders, whose togas brushed the stone floors of halls, still modest, yet heavy with weight. They were men bound not by crowns but by counsel, shaping rules, debating laws, raising voices that echoed off marble walls and across centuries. In this moment, Rome discovered the power of order, the discipline of debate, the balance of voices. And though power was still uneven, though aristocrats held more than the common man, the seed of something enduring was planted, the idea that no throne is eternal, that authority must be shared, that laws must outlast the men who write them. Picture the forum in this new light, where silence had once lingered in dawn. Now voices begin to rise, traders calling their wares, citizens pleading their causes, senators crossing the square in slow dignity, scribes carrying scrolls that contained the breadth of laws. The air is filled with dust and incense, the shuffle of sandals upon stone, the low murmur of Latin syllables forming decrees. Yet even in this noise, there is rhythm, order, the measured cadence of words spoken not for a moment, but for generations. The Republic awakens like a heart learning its steady beat, fragile and strong, imperfect and enduring. It is here that Rome began to discover its strength, not only in arms, but in ideas, not only in swords, but in laws, not only in conquest, but in the discipline of structure. The 12 tables were set, laws carved upon bronze, heavy with permanence. Laws meant not to vanish with the whims of kings, but to remain, to guide, to teach. Imagine the craftsmen inscribing letters upon metal, their chisels ringing softly in the morning air, the words glowing in firelight, destined to outlast the men whose hands trembled as they carved. In this act, Rome found something greater than myth, greater than blooded, found memory made solid, order made eternal. Yet the Republic was not without its struggles. Patricians and plebeians clashed, wealth pressed against poverty, ambition sought to stretch beyond its bounds. And still, from these struggles arose balance, compromise, the slow creation of systems that would endure. Tribunes rose to defend the people, consuls to guide the state, senators to deliberate, magistrates to execute, all bound together in a web that grew tighter with each generation. Imagine these figures not as distant rulers, but as voices within the hum of a city. Voices carried on the wind, voices that gave shape to the breath of thousands. Rome was learning how to govern itself, how to bind ambition with law, how to turn the clamor of men into the music of a republic. As you rest in this vision, see the Republic not as noise, but as rhythm, not as chaos, but as cadence. The debates of senators are like waves upon the Tiber, sometimes crashing, sometimes calm, but always flowing, always moving forward. The laws inscribed are like stars fixed in the night sky, guiding those who walk beneath them. The struggles between classes are like the stretching of a tree's roots and branches, painful yet necessary for growth. And through it all, the Republic awakens, slowly, steadily, carrying within it the strength that will one day become empire. The rise of Rome is not only in battles and victories, it is here, in the hum of voices, in the forum, in the chiseling of laws upon bronze, in the slow balance of power between patrician and plebeian. It is in the rhythms of markets and debates, in the gathering of citizens to cast their votes, in the slow weaving of community into structure. Rome was teaching itself to endure, and in this endurance lay its strength. So, as your own body lies in stillness, let the rhythm of the Republic soothe you. Hear the murmur of voices in debate as a lullaby, the chiseling of laws as a gentle tapping, the flow of the Tiber as the undercurrent of time. Let the awakening of order remind you that life itself is not chaos, but rhythm. That even in struggle there is structure, that even in noise there is music. The eternal city was learning this truth, and you may rest in it too, letting your breath fall into the same cadence, steady, calm, enduring. The Republic awakens, and with it, Rome begins to stretch beyond her hills, beyond her myths, beyond her silence, into the long corridors of history. Block 4. The expansion of the Republic. There are moments in the life of a city when its walls no longer feel like protection, but like boundaries waiting to be crossed, when its streets, once sufficient, begin to seem too narrow for the ambitions that grow within them. And for Rome, that moment came as naturally as dawn follows night. The Republic, with its balance of voices and laws, with its strength in order and discipline, found within itself a restlessness, a desire to stretch beyond the hills and rivers that cradled its birth. Expansion was not planned in a single day, nor decreed by a single voice, but rose slowly, inevitably, like a tide swelling against a shore, pressing outward, carrying with it legions, laws, and language. And as you rest within this unfolding story, imagine the pace, not as hurried conquest, but as the slow rhythm of inevitability, an expansion written into the very stones of the city. The early wars were fought close to home, neighbors pressed against neighbors, rival cities clashing, each believing their walls eternal, their gods supreme. Etruscans in the north, Samnites in the rugged hills, Latin allies testing the strength of their bonds all became threads in Rome's fabric as the Republic reached outward, weaving others into its design. Picture the legions marching, not with the thunder of violence, but with the steady cadence of discipline. Shields held close, sandals pressing dust into roads that stretched farther each year. Their footsteps were like a drumbeat that grew softer with distance yet never ceased, carrying the Republic's order outward like ripples upon a lake. And with each conquest came not only territory but integration. Rome did not merely destroy, it absorbed, it offered citizenship, it extended the hand of inclusion to those willing to share its burdens. Imagine the newly conquered standing in the forum, their voices uncertain, their accents thick with other lands, yet slowly finding place within the murmur of the Republic. Rome's strength was not in the sword alone, but in the ability to make others Roman, to turn enemies into allies, to weave the conquered into the conqueror's story. This weaving was not without strain, not without rebellion, but it endured. And in that endurance, the Republic expanded far beyond what its founders could have imagined. The Punic Wars brought Rome into conflict with Carthage, that proud city across the sea whose harbors glittered with trade, whose ships darkened the Mediterranean. The struggle was long and heavy, decades of battle upon land and water, elephants crossing mountains, fleets clashing under burning suns. And yet, as always, the rhythm was slow, inevitable. Carthage burned, and Rome rose higher upon the ashes, its gaze turning now not only upon Italy, but upon the world. Picture the Mediterranean, that vast inland sea, now ringed by Rome's influence. Its waters no longer barriers but pathways, its waves carrying legions and merchants alike, its harbors echoing with Latin voices. But expansion was more than battles and ships. It was the slow, steady building of roads, straight and enduring, stretching like veins across the land, carrying soldiers, merchants, messages, carrying Rome itself into the farthest provinces. Imagine the Via Appia, stones laid in careful order, stretching mile after mile, each stone a step in the Republic's expansion, each road a thread tying distant lands back to the heart of the city. Farmers in distant fields, merchants in foreign markets, soldiers at far-flung outposts all, were bound by the same roads, the same laws, the same slow rhythm of Rome. Yet with expansion came strain, for the Republic's structures, built for a city, were now stretched across continents. Wealth flowed in, uneven and heavy, filling the hands of few and leaving many in want. Slaves taken in conquest crowded the streets, changing the rhythm of labor, altering the balance of society. Senators grew richer, generals more ambitious, the poor more restless. The same roads that carried order also carried discontent. The same legions that brought victory also brought voices of men who longed for more than the Senate could give. Expansion brought greatness, but it also sowed seeds of imbalance, seeds that would one day rise as weeds among the wheat of empire. Still, for now, in this part of the story, Rome expands with steady breath, each battle, each treaty, each road a step upon the long path of history. Imagine the city now, her markets filled with goods from distant lands, spices and silks, wine and grain, her temples echoing with prayers to gods, both Roman and foreign, her streets filled with faces from across the Mediterranean. Rome is no longer only herself. She is the world gathered within walls, the hum of voices carrying accents from every province. And in that gathering there is strength, the strength of diversity woven into order, the strength of many bound as one. As you let this vision settle upon you, hear the footsteps of legions, not as thunder but as heartbeat, steady, patient, unending. Hear the murmur of markets as a lullaby, the rustle of scrolls in the Senate as a whisper, the hum of voices from distant lands as a soft chorus. The Republic expands, but you may rest, for its expansion, though vast, is steady, unhurried, inevitable. Breathe with it, slowly, calmly, letting each breath carry you deeper into rest, as if you too were lying upon the stones of the Via Appia, gazing upward at a sky that has always known how to endure. Rome expands, and with each step outward she carries her order, her laws, her voice, until the world itself becomes her reflection. And yet, even here, within this greatness, the seeds of struggle are already planted, waiting for their season. But for now, let that season rest, and let the expansion of the Republic be enough to soothe you into calm. Block 5. The Age of Generals. When the Republic had stretched its arms across seas and mountains, when her roads bound distant lands to her heart, when wealth flowed in like rivers of gold and silver and slaves crowded the streets in numbers unimagined by her founders, the balance that once held Rome steady began to bend. For what had started as a city of shepherds and farmers, guided by laws carved upon bronze, began to become a stage for men whose ambition reached farther than the Senate, farther than the Forum, farther even than the borders of the known world. This was the age of generals, men whose names would echo through centuries. Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar each, one rising not only with armies, but with visions that strained the Republic's delicate harmony. And yet, as you listen, let the story unfold, not as clamor, but as quiet inevitability. The slow turning of history's wheel, each revolution carrying Rome closer to her transformation. Imagine Gaius Marius, a man not born into patrician ease, but rising through talent and discipline, reshaping the legions themselves. Where once only the landowning citizen could take up arms, Marius opened the ranks to the poor, to those whose hands were rough with labor, whose bellies had known hunger. And with this change, the army became not only Rome's defense, but her ladder, a path for the lowly to rise, a bond between soldier and general stronger than the bond between soldier and state. The legions, once loyal to the Senate, grew loyal to their commander, and in that shift a tremor began, faint but deep, a crack in the marble of the Republic. Hear now the slow rhythm of boots striking stone roads, thousands of men marching not only for Rome, but for the man who led them, their breath one breath, their will one will. Then came Sulla, stern and unyielding, who marched his legions not against foreign enemies, but against Rome herself. Imagine the shock of citizens as soldiers, dust-covered from campaign, entered their own streets with swords drawn, a river of discipline flowing into the heart of the city, silence falling as if eternity itself had paused to listen. Blood stained the Forum, prescriptions were written, names carved not upon monuments, but upon lists of death. And yet through this violence the Republic learned a truth that could not be forgotten, that generals with loyal armies could unmake the Senate's decrees, that the laws inscribed upon bronze could be broken by men with steel. The silence that followed was heavy, not only with grief, but with the realization that the balance was slipping, that power was bending toward those who commanded legions. Pompey followed, rising like a star, victorious in distant lands, bringing spoils and triumphs to Rome, his name spoken with awe in markets and temples alike. Imagine his return, processions moving through the streets, prisoners in chains, treasures gleaming, crowds roaring with adoration. And yet, in the hush beneath the noise, another truth lingered. Rome was learning to worship men. Not laws, to honor generals, not senators, to place destiny in the hands of those who commanded armies, rather than those who shaped decrees. Each triumph, though glorious, was another stone laid upon the scale of imbalance, another step toward the Republic's transformation. And then Julius Caesar, the name that would outlast them all, whose ambition burned quietly at first, but grew with every campaign, every victory, every word spoken in the Senate. He crossed the Rubicon, that small river turned into a boundary of history, and with that crossing the Republic itself trembled. Imagine the silence of that moment, soldiers waiting, water flowing softly, the night deep with anticipation, and then the step forward, unhurried, decisive, the sound of sandals pressing mud, the murmur of men following, the history of Rome tilting as gently and as irreversibly as dawn tilts the sky from darkness into light. This was the age of generals, when Rome learned that her greatest victories would also be her greatest undoing. That the discipline of legions could not only conquer lands, but conquer the city that had given them birth. Yet even in this, there is a lullaby, for the story does not rush. It unfolds with inevitability, with rhythm, with the same slow certainty that carries you now deeper into rest. The footsteps of legions are steady, like your breath, rising and falling, rising and falling. The ambition of generals is heavy, like the weight of sleep upon your eyes, pressing gently, irresistibly. The Republic bends, but it does not yet break, and in that bending there is still calm. The calm of knowing that history moves always forward, that empires rise and fall as surely as tides. As you let this vision settle upon you, imagine the Forum once more, its stones washed with the footsteps of men who debated laws, now echoing with the steps of soldiers loyal to their general. Hear the quiet murmur of citizens watching, uncertain, knowing that something has changed, yet unable to name it fully. Feel the weight of inevitability, not as fear but as rhythm, the rhythm of Rome's transformation, the rhythm of history itself. And let that rhythm carry you deeper into stillness, deeper into calm, deeper into the rest that comes when you realize that even the greatest struggles are but breaths in the long silence of eternity. Rome has entered the age of generals, and with it the Republic begins to fade, not in a single moment, not in one battle, but slowly, steadily, inevitably, and as it fades, the empire prepares to rise. Block 6. The Rise of Augustus. After the tremors of civil war, after the long nights of uncertainty when Rome's streets had echoed with the footsteps of soldiers loyal not to the Senate but to the names of men, after the shadow of Caesar's fall and the cries that followed his last breath upon the Ides of March, there came a time when the city hung between collapse and renewal, when the very air seemed to wait, heavy and still, for what voice would claim her destiny. Out of that waiting stepped Octavian, the young heir of Julius, quiet at first, unassuming. A figure underestimated by rivals who thought him too fragile, too slight, too untested. And yet history moves, not by appearances, but by inevitability, and Octavian, who would be called Augustus, became the still center around which the chaos of the Republic dissolved, and the order of empire was born. Imagine Rome in those years of uncertainty, the Forum restless, senators whispering in corners, alliances formed and broken in shadows. The Tiber carrying rumors like reflections upon its waters. The city was weary, its people uncertain, its laws stretched thin by ambition and betrayal. Yet Octavian moved with patience, with calculation, with a silence that unsettled even those who thought him weak. Beside him marched legions loyal not only to his name but to the promise of order after chaos. His victories, first over Antony's rivals, then over Antony himself and Cleopatra upon the waters of Actium, were not merely battles but turning points. The slow tilting of history's scale from the fracturing of the Republic toward the unity of empire. Picture the sea at Actium, waves shimmering beneath the sun, sails snapping in the wind, oars dipping in slow rhythm, and upon the horizon the fleets of Antony and Cleopatra gleaming, proud, defiant. Then imagine the calm, deliberate movements of Octavian's forces, the patience of strategy, the stillness that belied the storm. When the clash came, it was not chaos, but inevitability, the slow crumbling of resistance, the retreat of power, the unraveling of alliances. From that day, Rome would no longer be bound by the arguments of senators or the rivalries of generals. It would be bound by the will of one man, the princeps, the first citizen, Augustus. And yet the rise of Augustus was not the birth of tyranny but of order, not the crushing of freedom but the weaving of stability. For the people of Rome, weary of endless wars, his name meant Peace Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Imagine the streets now, once filled with fear, slowly filling again with life, merchants spreading wares upon their stalls, children running barefoot across stones, temples echoing with prayers of gratitude. Augustus closed the gates of Janus, the god of war, declaring that for once Rome was not at war, that for once the swords could rest. And in that rest the city began to breathe again, the empire rising not upon the noise of conquest, but upon the silence of peace. Under Augustus, the city itself was remade, stone replacing wood, marble gleaming where once only modest walls had stood. I found Rome a city of bricks, he would say, and I leave it a city of marble. Imagine the transformation, the forum expanding, arches rising, temples gleaming in the light of dawn, aqueducts carrying water from distant hills, fountains spilling into basins where citizens gathered to drink. The eternal city was being dressed in permanence, her skin reshaped to match her destiny, her streets flowing not only with citizens, but with symbols, each stone whispering of the order Augustus brought. But Augustus's rise was not only in stone and law, it was also in the quiet reordering of power. The Senate remained, yes, but its voice was softened, its weight shifted. The people still gathered, but their choices were guided, their freedoms framed. Augustus held no crown, wore no title of king, but his authority stretched farther than any monarch's, his decisions binding the empire as the Tiber binds the hills. He called himself princeps, first among equals, but all knew that he was more than equal, that in his silence and his presence lay the power of Rome entire. And yet the people did not resist, for what he offered was not oppression but calm, not chaos but stability, not ambition's roar but peace's lullaby. Let this vision of Augustus soothe you now. Hear the calm cadence of his reforms, the steady rhythm of aqueducts carrying water, the soft hush of marble rising where once only clay had stood. Feel the peace of Pax Romana as a blanket drawn across the restless body of an empire, calming its struggles, softening its noise, quieting its storms. For Augustus was not only a ruler but a restorer, turning Rome from the noise of civil war into the silence of empire, and in that silence the world itself found rest. The legions marched still, yes, but their marching was steady, ordered, purposeful. Provinces were governed, taxes collected, justice administered, roads stretched even farther, carrying not only soldiers but merchants, travelers, pilgrims. The Mediterranean became Mare Nostrum, its waters reflecting the calm of Roman order. Imagine yourself upon one of those roads, walking slowly, feeling the smooth stones beneath your feet, the horizon opening before you, the knowledge that wherever you traveled, Rome was there, steady, unbroken, present. This was the gift of Augustus, the gift of continuity, the gift of peace. And yet, even here, in the hush of marble and the calm of Pax Romana, the seeds of decline were already planted, for no peace endures forever. No empire escapes the rhythm of rise and fall. But for now, let that truth rest. Let Augustus's rise carry you into calm. Let his order soothe your thoughts. Let his marble gleam in your imagination like starlight upon water. Rome has entered her golden age, and with it the world itself seems steadier, quieter, more eternal. So breathe deeply, slowly, letting your body sink into stillness as Rome sinks into peace. The Republic is gone, the Empire is born, and in this birth there is serenity. Augustus rises, and with him Rome shines, a city of marble, a city of order, a city eternal. And as you listen, let that eternity cradle you into rest, as if you too were walking her quiet streets at dawn. The world held steady beneath the gaze of a single, patient man. Block 7. The Age of Pax Romana. There are seasons in the life of a people when conflict, so long endured, yields at last to calm. When the restless clamor of ambition settles into the rhythm of order, and when the stones of cities and the waters of seas seem to sigh with relief beneath the quiet hand of stability. For Rome, that season was called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, our time, not without its shadows, yet remembered as an era when the weight of empire brought with it not only power but stillness, not only conquest but continuity, not only the noise of armies but the silence of order. Under Augustus and those who followed him, the empire stretched vast. From misty Britannia to the sands of Arabia, from the dark forests of Germania to the shining waters of the Nile. And yet, within this vastness there flowed a single pulse, the steady heartbeat of Rome. Imagine standing upon one of her great roads, a ribbon of stone stretching endlessly toward the horizon, mile markers set in quiet intervals, archers rising to honor victories, aqueducts marching in steady lines across valleys, carrying water as veins carry lifeblood. Along these roads move legions in perfect cadence, merchants with caravans of goods, pilgrims carrying stories, messengers bearing scrolls. The road itself hums with purpose, a symbol of Rome's gift to the world connection. Continuity, a thread binding distant provinces into one fabric. And as the sun warms the stone beneath your feet, you realize that these roads are not only paths across earth, but across time, carrying the order of Rome into places once thought unreachable. In the cities of the empire, life unfolds in rhythms shaped by this peace. Markets overflow with goods grain from Egypt, olives from Hispania, silk from the east, spices carried by camel across deserts. The voices of traders mingle in a chorus of languages, yet all are bound by the law of Rome, the coin of Rome, the authority of Rome. In amphitheaters, crowds gather, not in fear of war, but in hunger for spectacle. The games unfolding beneath the bright sky, the roar of the people filling the air like surf against the shore. In baths, citizens soak in warm water, voices drifting lazily through marble halls, while in temples the scent of incense rises in calm devotion. Across provinces, order holds, the peace maintained by roads, laws, legions, and the patient weight of empire. The Pax Romana was not peace in the sense of stillness, for Rome never ceased her motion. It was peace in the sense of rhythm, the steady continuity of a world bound together. Imagine the Mediterranean, no longer a sea divided by rival powers, but Mare Nostrum sits waves, carrying Roman ships between harbours that all fly the same eagle standard. Ports bustle with commerce, sails gleaming in the sun, sailors singing as they pull ropes and oars, goods exchanged with the ease of long familiarity. This was not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of order, a peace born not from the absence of motion, but from its careful harmony. And yet, within this harmony, the empire's true strength lay not only in armies and walls, but in the weaving of cultures. Rome absorbed, Rome integrated, Rome allowed local gods to stand beside her own, local languages to echo alongside Latin, local customs to blend with Roman order. In Gaul, temples rose to Roman gods beside Celtic shrines. In Egypt, the mysteries of Isis and Osiris continued beneath Roman arches. In Judea, prayers to the Eternal rose even under the watchful eyes of Roman governors. This tolerance, uneven though it was, allowed the empire to feel not only vast but inclusive, a great mosaic of peoples, each stone unique yet bound by the cement of Roman law. Picture the provinces at dusk, farmers returning from fields in Africa, traders unloading ships in Asia Minor, shepherds guiding flocks across Gallic hills, all under the same sky, all beneath the same order, all kept within the wide embrace of Rome. Their lives were simple, their burdens heavy, but their days unfolded within the structure of stability, the assurance that the legions kept the roads safe, that the markets would open tomorrow, that the order of empire would endure. And though they may not have thought of Rome each day, her presence was felt in every coin, every road, every law, every prayer whispered beneath arches she had built. The Pax Romana was not eternal no peace, but in its centuries it offered the world a rare stillness, a time when culture blossomed, when literature and art flourished, when architects shaped arches and domes that would outlast their names, when poets sang of love and empire, when philosophers debated the nature of order beneath colonnades. Virgil composed verses of Rome's destiny, Horace sang of wine and time, Ovid wrote of love and myth, Livy traced the city's history from shepherds to empire. These voices, rising in the calm of peace, have drifted across centuries, and even now, in this moment, their echoes reach you like whispers in the dark, gentle, steady, eternal. So let this vision of Pax Romana ease you into rest. Hear the cadence of legions as your own breath, steady, unhurried, inevitable. See the marble cities shimmering in sunlight as the dreams that pass gently across your mind. Feel the peace of an empire that once held the world in quiet order, and let that peace hold you now. For though the empire would one day falter, though shadows would creep again across her borders, the memory of this peace endures, like the echo of calm after storm, like the warmth of sunlight after rain. Breathe slowly, deeply, as if walking the long roads of Rome, as if watching the Mediterranean's waves shimmer beneath sails, as if standing in the forum at dusk when voices quiet and torches glow. The Pax Romana is not only history, it is a rhythm, a lullaby carried across centuries, inviting you into stillness, into calm, into sleep. Block 8. The Height of Empire. There are moments in the life of a civilization when its breadth and brilliance seem to stretch beyond the limits of imagination, when its name is spoken in distant markets as if it were the name of the world itself, when the hum of its order and the glow of its marble give the illusion of permanence. For Rome, that moment was her height, the centuries when emperors walked beneath gilded ceilings, when the Colosseum roared with the breath of thousands, when aqueducts marched like stone rivers across valleys, and when the very earth seemed to bend beneath the weight of her roads, her laws, her banners. To speak of Rome at her zenith is to speak of a city that no longer belonged only to herself, but to the world she gathered within her arms. And as you listen, let this vision not be noise or clamor, but a lullaby of greatness, a whisper of vastness told in the calm rhythm of inevitability. Imagine standing upon the Palatine Hill at dawn, the city stretching outward like a sea of rooftops, domes and arches catching the first gold of the sun. The forum below stirs with voices, senators in white togas walking slowly across marble floors, merchants spreading their wares beneath colonnades, scribes unrolling scrolls upon wooden benches. Columns rise like silent guardians, their flutes etched with time, their capitals carved with delicate leaves that seem almost to move in the breeze. Fountains spill water into basins, their trickle a gentle counterpoint to the murmur of voices. Everywhere the presence of Rome is felt, not as chaos but as rhythm, as a living order woven into every street, every stone. Beyond the Forum, the Colosseum towers, vast and eternal, its arches layered one upon another, its walls curved like the horizon itself. Imagine the crowd gathering, the sound of thousands filling the air like waves, the arena below bathed in sunlight. Yet even here, in the roar of spectacle, there is rhythm, the measured parade of gladiators, the trumpets calling in unison, the gates opening with the slow gravity of inevitability. The games, though fierce, are not endless chaos. They are framed by order, by ritual, by the presence of empire itself. And when the crowd roars, it roars not only for men and beasts, but for Rome, for the city that has made such gatherings possible, for the empire that holds the world within its arms. The aqueducts, those stone rivers lifted high upon arches, stretch across valleys and hills, carrying life from distant springs into the heart of the city. Imagine the sound of water flowing, steady and unbroken, cool and pure, arriving in fountains, in baths, in households. Rome is not only marble and law, she is water flowing in stone channels. She is bread arriving from fields across seas. She is the hum of markets overflowing with goods from every corner of the world. Grain from Egypt, silk from China, spices from Arabia, gold from Spain, all gather here in stalls shaded by awnings, their scents mingling, their colors dazzling. To walk through these markets is to walk through the empire itself, to hear voices in Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Egyptian, Gaulish, all blending into one chorus, one hum of Rome. In this height of empire, culture blossoms as surely as commerce. Poets recite verses in shaded gardens, philosophers debate beneath colonnades, artists shape marble into lifelike forms, painters cover walls with colors that glow even in dim light. Temples rise, dedicated to gods old and new, their steps worn smooth by worshippers, their altars flickering with flame. And beyond the city, in distant provinces, Roman order carries itself outward. Towns are laid with forums and baths, theaters and temples, their streets paved with stone, their citizens speaking Latin alongside their native tongues. Rome has become not only a city but an idea, a pattern impressed upon the world, a rhythm carried into every land she touches. At her height, Rome feels eternal. The legions guard the frontiers with unshaken discipline, their standards gleaming in the sun. The roads stretched farther than the eye can see, their stones worn smooth by countless footsteps, countless wheels. The Mediterranean shimmers beneath sails, its waters carrying trade and messages, its harbors bustling with life. The emperor sits in his palace, his word law across continents, his image carved into coins that pass from hand to hand in markets distant and near. Rome is the center, the axis upon which the world seems to turn. And yet, even here, at the height of her glory, Shadows linger, wealth flows, but unevenly. Palaces gleam, while the poor crowd into insulae, tall, fragile apartment blocks, where fire and collapse are constant fears. Senators debate, but often their voices are guided by ambition more than virtue. The games entertain, but they also distract, filling days with spectacle while deeper strains pull at the heart of the empire. For no height is without its fragility, no greatness without its cracks. The Colosseum may gleam, but its stones will one day weather. The aqueducts may flow, but their arches will one day falter. And the empire, vast though it is, carries within it the seeds of change. Still, for now, let the vision remain at its brightest. Let yourself walk slowly through marble halls, hear the murmur of markets, feel the coolness of fountains. Watch the sun rising over domes and arches. Let Rome's height be not a clamor, but a lullaby, her greatness not a roar, but a rhythm. For in this moment the eternal city shines, and her shine is enough to calm your thoughts, to soften your breath, to draw you deeper into rest. Rome stands at her height, vast, eternal, luminous. And as you lie in stillness, let her stillness become your own. The calm of empire, the hush of order, the lullaby of greatness at peace. Block 9. The shadows of decline. Every empire, no matter how radiant its marble, no matter how wide its roads, no matter how enduring its laws, carries within itself the seeds of its own fading. For Rome, those seeds were not scattered suddenly, nor did they sprout in haste. They grew slowly, quietly, like cracks that first appear as faint lines upon stone, hardly noticed, yet deepening with every change of season, until one day the weight above them can no longer be borne. And so, even in the height of Rome's glory, in the brilliance of her markets, in the grandeur of her games, in the authority of her emperors, the shadows of decline were already falling softly across her walls, not with thunder, but with inevitability, not as a sudden storm, but as the slow fading of a long day into twilight. Imagine walking once more through her streets. The marble gleams, the fountains still spill their waters, the arches rise proudly, yet within the narrow alleys between insulae, the tall and fragile apartments where the poor dwell, life is crowded and precarious. Fires break out, collapsing walls bury families, disease spreads swiftly in the close air. The grandeur of Rome is seen in her monuments, but her fragility is seen in the lives of her many, and the gap between the two grows wider each year. Wealth flows endlessly into the hands of a few, senators and nobles whose villas gleam with mosaics and gardens, while countless citizens live pressed together in shadow. The balance that once allowed the Republic to endure has tilted, and though the empire seems steady, its foundations whisper of strain. Beyond the city, legions guard frontiers that stretch farther than any one empire should bear. In forests to the north, in deserts to the east, in mountains to the west, soldiers stand watch, their camps lonely, their roads long, their battles endless. They march still in rhythm, their discipline still unbroken, but whispers rise among them. Many are no longer citizens, but mercenaries, men from conquered lands, loyal less to Rome herself than to the pay she offers. The bond that once tied soldier to city, general to senate, grows thin, stretched across distances to vast. Imagine their camps at night, fires flickering beneath strange stars, voices speaking in tongues unfamiliar, and feel, in that distance, the quiet fraying of Rome's unity. The emperors, too, change. Augustus once ruled with measured hand, his power cloaked in calm restraint, but those who followed were not always so steady. Some ruled with wisdom, yes, but others with cruelty, with excess, with madness that echoed through marble halls and spilled into streets. Caligula, with his capricious commands, Nero, with his burning ambitions, Domitian, with his fear-rich, became a reflection of imbalance, shadows of power that turned inward rather than outward, rulers who consumed the empire's strength in personal excess rather than sustaining it. And though order returned again and again, though capable emperors rose to steady the course, the pattern of instability had been set, a rhythm of greatness and ruin repeating within the palace itself. Economy, too, bore the weight of decline. Coins that once gleamed with silver became thin, their metal reduced, their value uncertain. Inflation crept like a thief, subtle at first, then heavy, as citizens found their labor worth less and their burdens heavier. Bread, once abundant, grew scarce for the poor. Riots flared, not against enemies but against shortages, against the hunger that gnawed in the belly, even while the Colosseum roared with games meant to distract. Bread and circuses, they said the promise of food and spectacle to keep the masses quiet. But bread often failed, and circuses could not forever soothe the weight of emptiness. And yet Rome still appeared eternal. Her aqueducts still carried water, her legions still guarded her borders, her markets still overflowed with goods from distant lands. Decline does not come with sudden silence. It comes with small shifts, with quiet weariness, with changes almost unseen. Imagine the Forum at dusks, still crowded, still noisy, yet beneath the hum of voices a new tone, a restlessness, a discontent that lingers in shadows. Rome is not yet falling, but she is already leaning, her balance tested by the very weight of her greatness. As you let this vision drift through you, think of the twilight of a long day. The sun is still bright, the air still warm, yet the shadows lengthen across fields, and you know night is coming though the sky still glows. So it was with Rome. Her height shone still, but the shadows of decline stretched quietly, softly across her empire. The poor grew restless, the legions more mercenary, the emperors more uncertain, the economy more fragile. The seeds planted in conquest, in ambition, in imbalance, had begun to grow. Let this rhythm soothe you, for it is not only Rome's story, but the story of all things rise and fall, dawn and dusk, birth and fading. Empires, like lives, are bound by time, their greatness always shadowed by decline. And yet, in this inevitability there is calm, the calm of knowing that what falls does so in rhythm, that endings are not chaos, but part of the same order that gave rise in the first place. Breathe slowly, gently, as if walking Rome's streets at twilight, the marble still glowing, the shadows deepening, the city still alive but already whispering of sleep. Rome stands still, vast, eternal in appearance, yet fragile within. The shadows of decline lengthen, and though the night is not yet come, it is already promised. Block 10. The crisis of the 3rd century. There are moments in the slow breathing of empires when the steady rhythm of order falters, when the heartbeat that once seemed eternal begins to stumble, when the calm that once wrapped a world in continuity is broken by sudden tremors. For Rome, that long twilight deepened in the 3rd century, when the empire, stretched vast and weary, found itself pulled apart not by a single blow, but by many at once foreign invasions pressing upon her borders, civil wars tearing her within, economies collapsing under the weight of inflation and scarcity, plagues sweeping through her streets like shadows, emperors rising and falling in dizzying succession. This was not the quiet decline of whispers and cracks. It was the storm, the season when the eternal city trembled, when the Pax Romana was only memory, and when the very idea of Rome seemed fragile against the tide of history. Imagine the frontiers first, those long lines where legions once stood like iron walls. In the north, Germanic tribes pressed upon the borders, their warriors moving through forests, their voices rising in unfamiliar songs. Along the Danube and the Rhine, forts once strong, now strained under repeated attacks. Soldiers weary, supplies short, commanders uncertain. In the east, new powers stirred the Persians, rising with ambition, their armies fierce, their kings eager to reclaim lands Rome had long held. Battles raged across plains and rivers, victories won and lost, but the weight of so many enemies at once left Rome stretched, her legions moving too slowly, her resources too thin. Picture the camps at night, torches flickering weakly, soldiers whispering not of triumph but of survival, their eyes heavy, their loyalty uncertain. Within the empire itself, the struggle was no less heavy. Emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed, some reigning only months before being overthrown, assassinated, or defeated. In a span of decades, dozens claimed the purple, their names flickering across the memory of history like sparks that flare and vanish in the dark. Imagine the marble halls of the palace, once steady with the voice of Augustus, now echoing with hurried footsteps, whispers of plots, the clash of ambition against ambition. The throne, once the center of order, had become a seat of fragility, its weight too heavy for any one man to hold long. Economy too faltered. Coins grew thin, their silver diminished, their value uncertain. Inflation spread like a slow fire, prices rising, markets trembling, bread scarce for the many. Fields once rich lay barren, either from overuse or neglect, while plague carried death through towns and cities, emptying homes, silencing streets, leaving markets half deserted. Imagine walking through a forum where stalls once overflowed with goods from every province, now sparse, the voices of merchants replaced by silence, the scent of spices replaced by the must of emptiness. The empire that once fed the world struggled now to feed itself. And yet, even within this storm, Rome endured. For each emperor who fell, another rose. For each frontier breached, another legion formed. For each scarcity, some measure of survival was found. The empire did not collapse in a single blow, because its roots were deep, its roads still stretched, its laws still echoed, its people still clung to the name of Rome as to a star in a darkened sky. Imagine citizens gathering in temples, their prayers rising desperately to gods old and new, their voices trembling but united. Imagine soldiers still swearing oaths, their hands upon standards, even as shadows pressed against their camps. The storm raged, but the tree stood, battered yet unbroken, branches torn yet roots still clinging to the soil. As you rest in this vision, let the crisis of the 3rd century be not chaos in your ears but rhythm, the slow pounding of waves against cliffs. Each invasion, each rebellion, each famine, each plague was another wave, heavy and relentless, and yet the cliffs remained, eroded but standing. Rome bent beneath the storm, but did not yet fall. This too is the rhythm of history, the inevitability that empires must be tested, that peace must give way to trial, that greatness must learn endurance. And though the noise of battles and the cries of hunger filled the air then, what remains for you now is the hush of inevitability, the lullaby of endurance itself. Picture the empire as a great lamp, its flame flickering, shrinking, threatened by wind and storm, yet still glowing, still giving light, however faint. The crisis of the 3rd century was that storm, a time when the flame seemed ready to vanish, and yet it endured, carried by hands that trembled but did not release it, protected by people who still believed that Rome, fragile though she seemed, was still Rome, eternal even in weakness. Breathe slowly with this rhythm, for in it is calm. Empires falter, but they also endure. Rome trembled, but she did not yet fall. The storm raged, but dawn still waited beyond the night. Block 11. The division of empire. There comes a point in the life of every vast body when its own size becomes too great to sustain, when the weight of distance and difference stretches the sinews of unity until they ache, when what was once one pulse begins to divide into two. For Rome, this moment came after centuries of strain, after storms had battered her frontiers, after emperors had risen and fallen with dizzying speed, after famine and plague had thinned her voice, after wealth and ambition had tilted her balance. The empire that had once called the Mediterranean mare Nostromo, sea now found that its arms, though long, could no longer embrace so vast a world with the same strength. And so Rome was divided, not suddenly, not without pain, but as if a great living body, weary and burdened, had to split its heart to keep breathing. Imagine first the map of this empire, wide as the known world, stretching from the misty shores of Britannia to the golden sands of Egypt, from the forests of Germania to the rivers of Mesopotamia. Roads crisscrossed it like veins, carrying soldiers, merchants, pilgrims, and laws. But those roads had grown long, too long for one hand to govern. Too many frontiers, too many voices. The emperors who tried to hold it all together found themselves worn thin, their eyes unable to watch east and west at once, their armies unable to march fast enough to guard all borders. The unity of Rome, though still real, trembled under the strain of size itself. And so, with deliberate necessity, the empire was divided. Diocletian, stern and practical, set the pattern to rulers, east and west, each with their own courts, their own capitals, their own strength, bound together by the same eagle, the same laws, the same memory of Rome. Later, Constantine would seal this truth, raising a new city upon the Bosporus, Constantinople, a second Rome, a city of domes and walls and waters, where east and west might both be joined and divided. Imagine the founding of this city, ships carrying marble across the sea, masons shaping stone, walls rising upon hills, domes reflecting the light of dawn. Constantinople stood like a mirror of Rome, younger, brighter, fresh with the energy of beginnings, while the old Rome upon the Tiber grew weary, its marble worn, its shadows lengthening. The division was not only geography but spirit. In the east, wealth lingered, trade flourished, learning and culture thrived beneath new roofs, roads still busy, markets still vibrant. The east held the treasures of Egypt, the commerce of Asia, the strength of cities still young in their vigor. In the west, the story was more fragile. Provinces once strong grew thin, roads crumbled, farms untended, towns abandoned. Germanic tribes pressed harder, crossing frontiers not only as raiders, but as settlers, seeking land, seeking homes. Rome in the west seemed less eternal, less certain, its voice quieter, its breath shallower. And yet the two halves were bound, tied together by memory, by law, by the long shadow of the same name. Coins still bore the face of emperors who ruled both east and west. Laws still echoed in both tongues of the empire. Prayers still rose to the same gods, though their temples stood in different cities. Rome was still one in idea, even as she was two in body. Her spirit stretched across lands too wide for one hand to hold. Imagine now the silence of this division, not a loud tearing, but a slow drifting, like a great cloth pulled apart, thread by thread. Rome upon the Tiber still stood, her columns still gleamed, her forums still echoed with voices, but she no longer bore the empire's full weight. Constantinople, new and gleaming, rose in strength, her harbour filled with ships, her walls high and strong, her position guarded by seas. The empire had not ended, but it had become two hearts beating within one body, two voices speaking within one name. And as you rest within this vision, let the division of Rome remind you of the rhythms of all life, that nothing vast can remain whole forever, that even the strongest must divide to endure, that even unity must sometimes yield to balance. Breathe slowly, as if walking the streets of both cities at once. Rome, ancient, marble worn by centuries, Constantinople new, domes glowing beneath fresh light. Feel the calm of inevitability, the hush of history's tide, the softness of division, not as destruction, but as adaptation, as the empire seeking to survive by becoming two. For Rome still endured, east and west, twin flames burning in one lamp, though one burned brighter and one already flickered. The division was both survival and foreshadowing, both strength and weakness, both dawn and dusk. And as you listen, let that paradox soothe you, for life too is woven of contradictions, of unions and separations, of rises and falls, of unity and division. Rome lived still, but in two voices, and soon one of those voices would fade. Block 12. The Fall of the Western Empire. Every story, no matter how radiant its beginning or how vast its height, must one day bend toward its close, and for the Western Roman Empire that closing came not as a sudden silence, but as a long fading, a slow unwinding of threads that had once been woven tight, a dimming of a flame that had burned across centuries. To speak of the fall of Rome is not to speak of one night, one battle, one act, but of many, spread across years and generations, until the city that once called herself eternal found her strength dissolved, her voice diminished, her marble chipped away by time and by need. And as you listen, let the fall unfold, not as the roar of collapse, but as the hush of twilight, the soft descent of a sun that has already given its light. Imagine the streets of Rome in these later years. The columns still rise, though worn, their carvings softened by centuries of wind and rain. The Forum still stands, but its stones are cracked, weeds growing between them, voices fewer, their echoes thin. Once, senators gathered here to decide the fate of provinces. Now their power is shadows, their debates empty. The emperors themselves are no longer rulers of grandeur, but pawns of generals, their crowns exchanged by soldiers' hands, their reigns brief, their names forgotten as quickly as they were proclaimed. The dignity of Augustus's title has become fragile, a crown without weight, a throne without stability. Beyond the city, the provinces fray. Roads once smooth with stone are broken, bridges collapse, aqueducts crumble, fields once rich lie barren. The legions that once marched in perfect cadence are fewer now, their ranks filled not with loyal citizens, but with mercenaries from distant tribes, men who fight for coin rather than devotion. The loyalty that once bound Rome to her soldiers is gone, and in its place is uncertainty, a sense that the empire's strength has scattered like dust upon the wind. Imagine their camps at night, fires burning low, discipline loosened, voices speaking in many tongues, their hearts bound less to Rome than to survival. The frontiers no longer hold. Germanic tribes press inward, not only as raiders, but as settlers, families with wagons and flocks, seeking land, seeking safety, seeking what Rome can no longer guard. Goths, Vandals, Franks, Lombards' names that once sounded distant now echo in the streets of Italy. Their banners raised within lands Rome had once claimed as her own. In 410, the unimaginable happens. Alaric and his Visigoths sacked the city, Rome itself plundered, her gates broken, her treasures seized, her people trembling. The eternal city, untouched for centuries, feels the weight of fire and sword, and the world realizes that she can be broken. Later, the Vandals come, crossing seas, their ships darkening horizons, their hands stripping marble, tearing down what once seemed unshakable. The word Vandal itself will forever carry the echo of their destruction. And yet, even in these shadows, Rome endures, her spirit refusing to vanish. Churches rise amid ruins, their bells echoing through broken forums, their prayers replacing the old hymns to Jupiter and Mars. Bishops, not senators, guide the people, their voices steady where emperors falter. The faith that had once been scorned now becomes the thread that holds the West together. The promise that even as empire fades, something eternal endures. Augustine writes of the city of God, a vision beyond marble, beyond armies, beyond time itself, a city that cannot fall even as Rome herself weakens. At last, in 476, the final breath of the Western Empire is drawn. Romulus Augustulus, the boy emperor, scarcely more than a name, surrenders his crown to Odoacer, a barbarian chieftain who does not destroy the city but simply takes what is already empty of strength. The crown is sent east to Constantinople, where the empire still stands, but in the west the line is broken. Imagine the moment. No great battle, no roaring collapse, only the quiet transfer of authority, a boy laying down what he cannot hold, a name that carries both the first and the last Romulus, founder of the city in myth, and Augustulus, the little Augustus, the final emperor of the West. The circle closes, softly, inevitably, as if history itself, as if history itself, as if history itself, as if his hell would slill, sem would still, end of it would slill slow, a cell of a, what up of go what am what of slambiddle, what up and what am of the bendema, what am I what am what, it well I but map in, I and na did I go, what have you you up. Picture Rome after this surrender. Her streets are quieter now, her monuments broken, her baths empty, her forums hushed. Cattle graze where senators once debated, children play in the ruins of temples, pilgrims walk among fallen columns. And yet, though the empire is gone, the city remains, her stones still whispering, her arches still reaching for the sky, her memory still vast. Rome has fallen, yes, but she has also transformed. No longer an empire, she becomes a relic, a teacher, a memory that will haunt and inspire ages to come. As you rest within this vision, let the fall of Rome be not noise but lullaby, not terror but calm inevitability. All things rise, all things fall. Empires are but breaths between dawn and dusk, their greatness bound always by time. The eternal city was not eternal in power, but eternal in memory, eternal in the lessons her rise and fall leave behind. Breathe slowly with this truth. Let your body sink into stillness as Rome sank into twilight. Let your mind ease with the knowledge that endings are not chaos, but completion, not destruction, but transformation. Rome has fallen, and yet Rome endures in memory, in stone, in the whispers of history, in the dreams of those who still walk her ruins. And in that endurance there is peace. Block 13. Echoes of Rome. When the last emperor of the West laid down his crown, when the legions had long since marched their final cadence, when marble cracked and aqueducts dried, one might have thought that Rome had ended, that the eternal city had at last surrendered her name to silence. Yet Rome did not vanish. Her echo lingered, softer perhaps than the roar of legions, quieter than the debates of senators, but no less enduring. For what Rome had given to the world was not only walls and roads, not only battles and emperors, but ideas, rhythms, patterns that continued to flow long after the empire itself had fallen. To listen for Rome is to hear her in every law that shapes a city, in every arch that spans a bridge, in every road that carries travelers across land, in every tongue that traces its roots back to Latin. Rome fell, and yet Rome remains, her presence woven into the fabric of history, her echo resounding in the chambers of time. Imagine walking through her ruins in the centuries that followed. The great forum now scattered with broken columns, weeds sprouting between stones once pressed by senators' sandals. The Colosseum, once roaring with thousands, now silent, its arches weathered, its walls housing birds that nest where emperors once sat. And yet, even in ruin, the stones still whisper. Travelers stand in awe, pilgrims kneel in reverence, poets find inspiration, painters sketch outlines against fading light. The ruins themselves become monuments, reminders that all things pass, and yet, in passing, they are remembered. Rome's greatness was not eternal in rule, but it became eternal in memory, in the way her story is told and retold, in the way her silence still stirs the imagination. The East endured, Constantinople shining, holding the name of Rome for 1,000 more years, her domes rising above waters where East and West met. But even as Byzantium carried the flame, the memory of the old Rome upon the Tiber never faded. In monasteries, monks copied texts that preserved Roman law, Roman history, Roman thought. In courts and councils, rulers across Europe called themselves heirs to Rome, claiming her authority even as her walls lay broken. In cathedrals, arches and domes echoed the forms of Roman builders, their stones carrying forward the language of empire in a new tongue of faith. And in every road, every city, every law, Rome's echo continued, softer now, but steady, guiding the world through its own dark nights. Even now, when you whisper her name, Rome, it carries with it more than a city. It carries the rise of shepherds and kings, the march of legions, the roar of crowds, the silence of decline, the echo of ruins, the endurance of memory. Rome is not only what was, Rome is what remains, what continues, what teaches. Her story is both a warning and a lullaby, that all greatness fades, that all power is fragile, but that memory endures, that influence persists, that even in falling, something eternal is left behind. And so, as this journey draws to its close, let the echo of Rome be your companion into rest. Hear her not as clamor but as softness, not as roar but as whisper, not as collapse but as transformation. The empire has fallen, but the story continues, drifting like a lullaby across centuries, inviting you into stillness. Breathe with that rhythm, rise and fall, dawn and dusk. Rome and her echo on, let it calm you, ease you, carry you gently into sleep. And if these echoes have quieted your heart, if the story of rise and fall has guided you gently toward rest, you may, in your own time, choose to let your presence be felt here too. You may like this video, or leave a comment sharing what part of Rome's journey stirred your wonder most, or share it with someone who might also need the calm of history's rhythm, or subscribe so that each new story may return to you when the night is long and silence is welcome. There is no urgency, only invitation, as soft as the whisper of ruins beneath the moon. For Rome has fallen, but Rome endures, in stone, in story, in memory. And tonight, her echo has become your lullaby.